The word was kind of, wow, this is a strange little movie. And I was just waiting to see the film when it was finished. I certainly knew it was having a certain style, but that's great. I mean, it should be something different.
The sense that there was a slightly surreal element to the film was something that was very important to try to get in. And I wanted to prepare the audience for the fact that they would be playing cards, for example, in a part of the train, and then suddenly in the middle of it they would be playing instruments, and then they would be back playing cards, because that did seem to be something that nobody had been doing. So we used 2 or 3 little signposts, like the boys suddenly being outside the train, banging on the window trying to get in, just to say to the audience, things are not quite what they seem to be.
We didn't concern ourselves with long shot, medium shot, close shot, over shoulder shot. Forget it. We just shot the picture the way we went, and whenever something came up, it was in the picture. When George knocked his amp over on one of the shows, in the picture. But that's what it was about.
Yeah, there's one particular scene that stands out in my mind, which was again the genius of John Jimson, was the sequence on the train where John starts to play with the cards, and he overlaps the sound before the actual singing starts.
Aye, the Liverpool Shuffle.
It was the first time that I'd ever seen that on film, of preempting the song. And this got you whacked right into the song, and suddenly you felt you were into something also very new again. That was one of the earliest things that John edited, and I was watching him on the movie Ola and seeing him stop and think, which he always did when he cut. He wouldn't do anything immediately like that, but when he did do it, that was it. And I think Pam may agree. I don't remember any alterations to that scene, or to many scenes, of the actual editing. The construction was John, and that was it. They may have taken out a scene or shortened it by a certain amount.
Well, I had lots of letters from girls all over the world, you know, asking for pieces of their hair, but of course I couldn't. I wished I'd had enough hair to send to them, really, but I couldn't, because, you know, it wasn't enough to cut off every week. But they, lots of letters I had, yeah. They didn't like everybody to be seen with it back. They always wanted to, you know, when we washed it, they always wanted, like this, you know, put their hair down in front. They never wanted to see their hair back. Because Ringo has a grey streak. He always hated to have that showing, so he used to always bring it forward if anybody came in the room, you know, they'd quickly put their hair down.
Well, the funny thing was, we made up the routine there and then on the set. And then Dick would say, well, can you do that step, this shot, this angle, that angle? So there was no rehearsal. We did it on the set. And I have to say that I found that wonderful. It's much easier. You know what the set's like, you know if there's a step there or anything, and you can choreograph your routine around what you've got. There's so much hanging around while they're setting lights and everything. It was very easy to rehearse. And of course, it didn't give us a chance to forget the steps. We did it there and then.
You see, I was never a theatre director. I was always, the expression is a kick, bollock and scramble man. It's just trying to get myself out of trouble. And I think it's using hysteria to try to con people that exuberance is taking place in front of them is a trick that I learned very early on. And again, by using a multiple camera technique, I was able to allow people the freedom to move, to go where they want as far as possible. No mark should be given to anybody. No one should have to hit a mark or sit to the center of their chairs. It was just, you do what you want to do, we'll go out in the field and have a play, and then we would find a way to turn it into a little sequence. The difficulty with this is that some 3 or 4 years later, you're asked to go to a film school in Copenhagen or Helsinki, and they put that sequence on for the students to watch, and then proceed to tell you why you did these shots and what significance they had. And it's extremely impolite to tell them the truth. So that in the end, this kind of myth builds up that you really knew what you were doing and that you had some control over this madhouse.
I'll show him.
I watched Dick directing under very tight conditions. In fact, at one point, he said, look, no cameras, nothing, because he wanted peace to be able to complete the shooting. So what I did was I went up into the gantry where the lights were so that I didn't interfere with anybody, and I did some high-angle shots down into the sets quietly.
Dad was visiting Twickenham Film Studios here, and he was dressed in a pretty formal dark grey suit. And in between fitting the boys' suits for the film, Paul had said to Dick Lester, Dougie's looking very, very tidy this morning. Why don't we let him play himself as the tailor? It took about 3/4 of a day shooting, and the reason was this: although it only lasted a minute and a half, the boys were constantly messing around.
Oh, this is the teacher's pet. All that. Shade the class, eh? I'll lay off.
His scene was he was measuring Paul. Paul was then moving out of camera, and while my father was still holding the tape measure, John would then say, "I now declare this bridge open." Then snip the tape measure and open. That was the official line. But of course, 100 other lines came up before that, i.e., I now declare this synagogue open, or I now declare this fish and chip shop open. So everyone was falling around laughing, and each time it had to be retaken, and that was the state of play that day.
I was completely mad in those days, obviously, and I would do a lot of jumping up and looking around and coming down again, and then a lot of other people would start jumping. They said, Ringo's going to do whatever you do, and I thought, well, let's see if he can jump as well. Actually, I was trying to keep my eye on my girlfriend at the time, who was Charlotte Rampling, and I could never quite see what she was doing, so I'd jump up and have a quick look round.
Hello.
Hello.
Oh, wait a minute. Don't
No,
tell
I'm
me
not.
you're- Oh, you are. John Lennon was extraordinary. He was an absolute natural actor. And we did the scene, and it was brilliantly written by Alan Owen. You don't look like him at all. The script had us finishing with John gave me a wink, and I gave him a wink. But, of course, when the film was shown, the winks were cut out.
She looks more like him than I do.
I had a wife that was a dancer called Prue, who's in the film, and she wanted to be an actress. And one of the parts that came up was a screaming teenager in the Hard Day's Night. As I knew Dick Lester, I got her a part.
Excuse me, but these young men I'm sitting with wondered if two of us could come over and join you.
Then there was a gambling scene, and not very many actors, one had enough money to gamble, or two knew how to handle a spatula or understood about chemin de fer or whatever.
Hello, monsieur.
So I was asked to go along and look at this and see if I could do it. I said, yes, I can do it, but I'm not a member of equity. I'm nothing. I'm a businessman. So Dick said, don't worry, we'll get you a card, and off you go. And so I did the croupier.
Huit et sept.
We had at our disposal something like 8 or 9 songs which they had just recorded. I eventually chose, I think, 7. I don't even remember why at the time I chose those 7 and left 2 out. We did actually shoot one more during the closing concert, and I felt this is enough. We're getting tired of this, stop. But by and large, if it were a musical sequence, there would be 3 cameras. With the final concert in Hard Day's Night, there were 6. And what was fascinating is that I didn't know 6 camera operators, and I had to call on friends and say, who do you know that's good? Because we need 6 to come in and shoot. And they got a pretty free brief. I can tell them the sort of things I'm looking for, but I can't run between 6 cameras. A, the sound was deafening, and B, somewhere on the stage, somewhere behind the stage, shooting back into the audience, and it became very much more a haphazard style of filmmaking.
Dick Lester said, you've got to get stuff when they're playing these numbers. So get a couple of those new 10-to-1 zoom lenses and just do what you think. So it gave us total freedom, because you've got to remember that in those days, there was no video assist or anything like that. You were the director's eyes, you know, you were doing it, and nobody else saw it until tomorrow. To be left to your own devices and get really good stuff, it was terrific. You know, pulling focus across guitar strings and all that sort of stuff. We established a style that's still used today when they photograph pop groups. You know, it's the best way of doing it, you know, get all the hand movements and stuff like that.
They shot masses of material, as you can imagine, because there were a lot of numbers being covered. And out of it, when we went to put it all together, of these 6 camera operators, we looked at all the material, and in the end, one of them, who was a very well-known camera operator, we never used 1 foot of his film. Whenever something was about to be interesting, he would move off and look for something else. And it was very revealing and very disturbing. One of the other camera operators, it might be interesting to know, was in amongst the girls in the crowd, and at the end of 4 days shooting had to be taken in an emergency car to his dentist because all his back teeth had come loose from the intensity of the sound.
It was driving me mad. I took a bottle of aspirin almost, because, you know, still got to carry on shooting. And I went to the dentist, and he said, there's nothing wrong with the tooth. And I said, well, there is. I said, because it's aching. I said, take it out. He reckoned that it was to do with vibration and frequency, something to do with the amalgam vibrating inside your mouth. It was absolute agony, I mean, it really was.
The sound was deafening, a high-pitched scream all day, once they were let in. And we did a rehearsal. They said, right, camera rehearsal, set up, and Dick had about 5 cameras going, one coming up here like that handheld. And I turned to continue with the scene, and I hit the cymbals on the drums. And Ringo said, hey, he's fingering me cymbals. And John immediately said, wonderful line, oh, then he must be a director, because they're famous cymbal fingerers.
I suppose that we weren't a completely 100% organised film. It wasn't a detailed script that I was used to. It was a suggestion script, and Dick gave the impression that we've got to do something with it, but what, he wasn't always sure of. And one time, the boys went out to play, and they started running about on this square, and this helicopter landed, and Dick said, oh, let's try and get on the helicopter and go up and shoot this. So I grabbed an Aeroflex and a battery, and we stuck a bit of rope across the door, and the bloke took us up. And when we got there, I discovered the battery was a worn-out battery, and the camera started off at 24 frames, but it was slowly going to 18, 16, 12, 4. And I thought, well, the only thing hope I got is to stop the lens down, because we're getting more exposure because it's a thing. So I stopped the lens down. But we didn't say anything to Dick, because we had to come down, that was it. But then the following day, he went to see the Rushes, and he came running up to me and he said, you're a bloody miracle man. He said, how did you do that? He said, well, I said, well, we had the mistake on the battery. So he said, we must get another helicopter and do some fast movement to the boys, which we did. So, I mean, that came as a bit of luck, really. It was never scripted. It works out very well in the film, doesn't it?
I suppose you realise this is private property.
Sorry we hurt your field, mister.
In our price bracket, we didn't even think about colour. The difficulty